The string lights twinkled like stars above the garden as I adjusted the last centerpiece, my hands trembling with excitement. Tomorrow, I would marry James in this very spot, my grandmother's estate garden where she'd grown her prize-winning roses for 40 years. The Victorian gazebo stood proud in the moonlight, wrapped in white tulle and baby's breath, waiting for our vows. "Perfect," I whispered, stepping back to admire the setup. 200 chairs arranged in perfect rows. The altar decorated with peonies and eucalyptus. The fountain bubbling softly in the background. After 3 years of planning and saving, my dream wedding was finally happening. Surprise! The booming voice shattered the peaceful moment. Uncle Richard strutted through the garden gates, flanked by my cousins Brandon and Tyler, all wearing matching smirks that made my stomach drop. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. They hadn't RSVP'd. They hadn't been invited. After the stunt they pulled at Grandma's funeral, trying to contest her will and claiming I'd manipulated her into leaving me the estate, I'd cut them out completely. "Just wanted to give you our wedding gift early," Richard said, pulling out a rolled document from his jacket. "Since we're family and all." Brandon snickered. "Yeah, Violet. Real special gift." My fiancé James appeared at my side, having heard the commotion from the house. "Gentlemen, the rehearsal dinner ended hours ago. I think it's time you left." "Oh, we're not staying," Richard said, unrolling the papers with theatrical flair. "Just wanted you to know that at dawn tomorrow, Hartley Construction will be here to tear this whole place down. We're building luxury condos. 30 units. Maybe 40 if we can squeeze them in." The paper slipped from my numb fingers, floating to the grass like a fallen leaf. "What? See, turns out Grandma didn't quite own this place free and clear like everyone thought," Richard continued, clearly enjoying himself. "There was a lien. Back taxes. Complicated stuff. But don't worry, we took care of it. Bought the debt, foreclosed on the property, and sold it to developers. Quite profitable, actually." "You can't do this," James said, his voice low and dangerous. "The wedding is tomorrow. 200 guests. Should have thought of that before you decided to have it on property that doesn't belong to you," Tyler laughed. "Man, the look on your face." I bent down to pick up the papers, scanning them with growing horror. Legal notices. Foreclosure documents. A demolition permit dated for tomorrow morning, my wedding day. "You're lying," I said, but my voice cracked. "Grandma left the estate to me. It's been in our family for generations." "Funny thing about family property," Richard said, checking his watch. "Sometimes there are secrets. Old debts. Missing paperwork. Amazing what you can find when you dig deep enough. Or what you can make disappear." "We'll call the police," James threatened. "Go ahead," Brandon shrugged. "We own it now. All legal. Judge signed off yesterday. Demo crew starts at 6 a.m. sharp. Better move those flowers. Wouldn't want them to get crushed by the bulldozers." They left laughing, their voices echoing through the garden that had hosted so many family memories. First communions. Graduation parties. Grandma's 80th birthday. And tomorrow, it was all supposed to host my wedding. I collapsed onto the garden bench, the one where Grandma used to sit and tell me stories. "What do we do?" I whispered. James pulled out his phone. "First, we call our lawyer. Then we start moving everything we can. Maybe we can find another venue. At midnight? For 200 people." Tears burned my eyes. They did this on purpose. They waited until tonight to tell us. We spent the next 4 hours in frantic damage control. Our lawyer confirmed the documents looked legitimate, but promised to dig deeper. We called every venue in a 50-mile radius, all booked. We texted the wedding party, trying to figure out alternatives without causing mass panic. By 3 a.m., I was sitting in the empty kitchen, still in my rehearsal dinner dress, staring at Grandma's photo on the wall. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I failed you. I couldn't protect it." James rubbed my shoulders. "We'll figure something out. Even if we have to get married in a parking lot, we're getting married tomorrow." I managed a weak smile. He was right. The venue didn't matter, but God, it hurt. This garden wasn't just a location. It was where Grandma taught me to plant seeds, where she showed me that beautiful things take time and patience to grow. At 5:45 a.m., we heard the rumble of trucks. Through the window, I watched a convoy of demolition equipment roll up the private drive. Bulldozers, wrecking balls, dump trucks, an entire crew ready to destroy a century of memories. "I can't watch this," I said, turning away. "Wait," James grabbed my arm. "Look." The lead truck had stopped. A man in a hard hat, The surveyor, based on his equipment, was walking the property line, checking his tablet repeatedly. His expression shifted from confident to confused to alarmed. He made a phone call, gesturing wildly. Then another. Soon, the entire crew was gathered around him, looking at papers, pointing at the house, shaking their heads. "What's happening?" I breathed. We ran outside, my wedding shoes crunching on the gravel. The surveyor saw us approaching and actually looked relieved. "Ma'am, are you Violet Hartley?" he asked. "Yes. Was my grandmother's estate." He let out a long breath. "Thank God. We have a major problem. We can't touch this property." "What?" Richard's voice screeched from behind us. He must have arrived to watch his handiwork. "I hired you. I own this land." The surveyor turned to him, tablet in hand. "Sir, whoever sold you this property committed fraud. This estate is registered as a historical site. Has been since 1962. Protected by federal law. But more importantly," he turned back to me, "it's registered under a trust. The Violet Rose Hartley Trust, established 43 years ago." My heart stopped. Violet Rose. My grandmother's name, and mine. "That's impossible," Richard sputtered. "I bought this property. I have the deed." "You have a deed," the surveyor corrected. "But it's worthless. According to county records, this property has been held in an irrevocable trust for decades. The only person who can authorize any changes to this property is Violet Rose Hartley. Says here there are 2 people by that name, one deceased as of last year, and one very much alive." He looked at me meaningfully. But Grandma never told me about a trust," I said, stunned. "Ma'am, I'd suggest you check with the courthouse. But right now, I can tell you that we're not touching so much as a blade of grass. In fact," he turned to Richard, "I'll be reporting this to the authorities. Attempting to demolish a historical site is a federal crime. Attempting to do it through fraudulent property claims? That's prison time." Richard's face went from red to purple to white. "This is a mistake. My lawyers. Better be good ones," the surveyor said. He signaled to his crew. "Pack it up, boys. And document everything. We're going to need statements for the investigation." As the demolition crew started leaving, taking photos of Richard's documents for evidence, I stood frozen in the morning light. The garden was safe. The wedding could happen. But more than that. "She knew," I whispered. "Grandma knew they'd try something like this." James squeezed my hand. "What do you mean?" "The trust. She named it after both of us, her name and mine. She must have set it up when I was born, knowing that one day." I couldn't finish, too overwhelmed by my grandmother's foresight. "Violet." My mother came running across the lawn, still in her pajamas. "What's happening?" "The neighbors called about trucks, and Richard? What are you doing here?" Behind her, guests were starting to arrive for the early morning setup. The florist, the caterers, the photographer, all stopping in confusion at the scene. Demolition trucks leaving, Richard being questioned by the surveyor, me standing in yesterday's dress with tears streaming down my face. "Mom," I said, finding my voice. "Call our lawyer. Call the courthouse. Call everyone." Uncle Richard tried to steal Grandma's estate and demolish it the morning of my wedding. The next 2 hours were chaos. Our lawyer arrived and confirmed what the surveyor had found. Not only was the property protected, but Richard's purchase was completely fraudulent. He'd forged documents, bribed a clerk, and attempted to push through a legal sale. The FBI arrived by 8 a.m. By 10 a.m., Richard, Brandon, and Tyler were in handcuffs, being led away as wedding guests began arriving. The photographer, quick thinking, captured it all. "Most dramatic wedding album ever," he muttered. I finally had a moment to breathe and process. The trust documents showed that Grandma had set everything up the year I was born, naming me as the sole beneficiary upon her death. She'd registered the house as a historical site due to its architectural significance and its gardens, which contained several rare heritage roses. But the real kicker was a letter the lawyer found attached to the trust documents, to be opened only if someone tried to wrongfully claim the property. I read it aloud to my mother and James in the garden, an hour before the ceremony. "My dearest Violet Rose, if you're reading this, then someone in our family has shown their true colors. I've watched your Uncle Richard's greed grow over the years, seen how he looks at this estate with dollar signs in his eyes. I knew he would try to take it from you. He tried to convince me many times to sell, to develop, to maximize the investment. He never understood that some things are worth more than money. This garden is your heritage. This is where your grandfather proposed to me, where your mother took her first steps, where you planted your first rose at age 5. It belongs to you not because of blood or law, but because you're the only one who sees its true value. Wear your wedding dress with pride in our garden, my dear one. Dance under the stars where your grandfather and I danced. And know that I'm there with you, in every flower, every tree, every breath of wind through the gazebo. All my love. Grandma Rose. By the time I finished reading, we were all crying. Mom hugged me tight. She always knew you were special. Said you had the same spirit she did. We should probably get you ready, James said gently. Unless you want to get married in yesterday's dress? I laughed through my tears. The wedding. Oh God, the wedding. It was the most chaotic, emotional, perfect wedding day imaginable. The story of the morning's events spread through the guests like wildfire. Everyone wanted to hear about Grandma's brilliant trap, about Richard's arrest, about the historical designation we never knew existed. I walked down the aisle in the garden that had almost been destroyed, past roses my grandmother had planted, toward the gazebo my grandfather had built. The same surveyor who'd saved our venue was in attendance. We'd invited him and his crew as special guests. During the reception, the photographer showed me a candid shot he'd taken that morning. Me in my wrinkled rehearsal dress, standing in the dawn light, looking up at the house with tears on my cheeks while FBI agents led Richard away in the background. This one's going in the album for sure, he said. It tells a story. The story of a grandmother who protected her granddaughter even from beyond the grave. The story of a family's greed backfiring spectacularly. The story of a wedding that almost wasn't, but became legendary. As James and I shared our first dance under those twinkling lights, in the garden that was now officially, legally, eternally mine, I felt Grandma's presence in every gentle breeze. Thank you, I whispered to the wind. For everything. Somewhere in federal custody, Richard was probably still insisting he owned the property. But here in the garden, surrounded by love and legacy, I own something far more valuable. The knowledge that some things can't be stolen, some roots run too deep to be torn up, and sometimes the best wedding gift is a grandmother who planned for everything. The DJ announced the next song, and as La Vie en Rose began to play, Grandma's favorite, every rose in the garden seemed to bloom a little brighter. The violet rose Hartley Trust would protect this place forever. And someday, maybe I'd have a granddaughter of my own to carry on the tradition. I'd name her Rose, and I'd teach her to plant seeds. And I'd make sure she knew that beautiful things take time and patience to grow. But tonight, I just danced in my grandmother's garden, in the place that greed couldn't touch, where love had planted roots too deep for any bulldozer to destroy.